In this video, we'll prep for the domain and range of functions by recalling a few things about rational and radical expressions. Now first, recall that a radical expression, and remember radical expression has a form of polynomial divided by a polynomial, that a rational expression is undefined for any values of the variable which will make the denominator 0. So in this case, you're to find any value which will make the following expression undefined, where the expression is x plus 3 over x squared minus 4x minus 5. So to find out what values will make the expression undefined means what values will make our denominator 0. So if I were doing this, the first thing I would do is set my denominator equal to 0, and then I'm going to solve that equation. Now in this case, this is a quadratic equation, so you could use a quadratic formula, but if it does factor, that's usually the quicker way to do it. And this one does factor to x minus 5 times x plus 1 equal to 0. Using the zero product property, if you have one thing times another equal to 0, then either the first thing is 0, so the x minus 5 is 0, or the x plus 1 is 0. Solving those two separately, you get x is 5, or x is negative 1. So in this case, this rational expression is undefined when x is 5 or x is negative 1. And it's defined everywhere else. The only values which will make this undefined are the values which will make a denominator equal to 0. It doesn't matter if a value will make our numerator 0, like in this case negative 3, that's fine, as long as it doesn't make the denominator 0. So it's undefined when, like I said, x is 5 or x is negative 1. Now another thing to recall is that if you have a radical expression where the index of the radical is even, now remember the index is like, if you have like the nth root of something, n is the index of the radical. So like when we're dealing with the square root, the index is 2. If we're dealing with the cube root, the index would be 3. If it was the fourth root, the index would be 4, and so on. So if the index of a radical is even, then the radical expression will be undefined for any value of the variable, which makes the radicand, that's what's underneath the radical sign. And for this one here, it's like that 3x minus 1. So it'll be undefined for any value of the variable which will make the radicand less than 0. Because remember, like you cannot take the square root of a negative value, for instance. And that holds true for any radical where the index is even. Now if the index is odd, then you have no problem. You could take the cube root of a negative value. Like for example, the cube root of negative 8 is negative 2. So for this example, you're to determine what values will make the expression undefined. So we got to see what values of the variable will this be undefined. Well, again, our index is 2, because when we don't write the index, it's the square root. The index is 2. So it'll be undefined if the radicand, what's underneath the radical, is less than 0. So what I'm going to do is set that less than 0, and then solve this inequality. Remember, to solve the inequality, what I would do next is add 1 to both sides of the inequality sign, so you get 3x. 3x is less than 1. Divide both sides by 3, so x would be less than 1/3. So it's undefined when x is less than 1/3. And you could also say it's defined when x is greater than or equal to 1/3. Because if you plug in any number greater than or equal to 1/3, then what will be underneath the radical sign will be some non-negative number, and it can be 0. Like we could plug in 1/3, because it'll be 3 times 1/3 would be 1, 1 minus 1 would be 0, and the square root of 0 is 0. So how does this relate to what you're going to be doing? Well, you're going to be dealing with rational and radical functions in the college algebra class, and they'll be asking you to find the domain of the rational and radical functions. And you're going to see by doing that, that's very similar to asking where is it defined, where is it undefined. So that's a little preview of what you're going to be dealing with.